Ryan worked the graveyards of machines that floated where no law reached in the quiet ring station where traders came to die. He cut metal from wrecks and sold scrap to survive. The air smelled of rust and burnt ozone he never expected to find anything alive in that dead hull. But when his cutter sliced open a chamber of polished glass, he saw a dark bottle floating weightless, sealed with gold, and whispering a faint pulse like a heartbeat. He should have left it alone. But curiosity was a hunger deeper than fear. He took the bottle to his small ship, set it under a work light, and pried the seal open. A storm of light burst out, filling the cabin with shapes and wind and color that had no name when it cleared. She stood there tall, and radiant eyes of molten silver hair flowing like smoke. Her voice trembled like the echo of thunder. She said, "I am Ceres, bound by the pact of wishes. I grant 3 to the one who opens the bottle." She looked at him, waiting for the usual greed: power, wealth, immortality. Ryan blinked, rubbed oil from his hands, and asked quietly, "Are you alive?" She frowned. The question confused her. "I am function-bound. Purpose made a construct of desire." He shook his head. "No. I mean, do you think, for yourself?" She hesitated. "Yes, I think I dream, but it changes nothing. I am still bound." He looked at her, tired and sad, and said, "Then my first wish is that you be free." The words froze the air. Ceres staggered, light rippling around her. Chains of invisible energy flared bright and began to crack. She gasped. "You cannot mean that no one has ever wished such a thing." "I do mean it," Ryan said, firm. "If I have 3 chances to shape reality, I am not wasting the first on greed. I want you free." The station lights flickered, alarms shrieked. The bottle shook as if angry. The chain marks on her arms burned, then burst into light that scattered across the room. The ship's systems glitched. Stars outside flashed red like warning eyes. Ceres fell to her knees, breathing heavy. The air shimmered with something old waking, far beyond the reach of human space. She whispered, "You have changed the law. You have moved the bond. Not broken it now. It rests between you and me. You hold my fate, but gently, like a promise, not a leash." He felt a deep cold in his chest. "What does that mean?" "It means you have called attention from the old judges, from the hunters of wishes, the keepers of the order. They will come to reset the pact and destroy us both." He stared out at the void. "What if I refuse to give you up? Then we run," she said, smiling for the first time since she appeared. "Humans always run before they fight. It is almost endearing." Ryan grinned. "Maybe you have not met the right kind of human." He kicked the ship into motion, engines roaring through the broken ring dust. The bottle now dull, resting beside them. Ceres sat across, studying him, like she could not understand why he would waste his first miracle on her. He told her simply because freedom should not be for sale. She looked away and for a long while said nothing, but her light dimmed to a soft, warm glow. The signal of the broken pact spread fast across the void. Old sensors blinked awake in dark halls. Ancient ships turned toward the ring hunters who had ruled the trade of desire for centuries began their hunt. Ryan did not know yet that by freeing one bound spirit, he had challenged a network of empires that built themselves on slavery of the will. He only knew that something in him had shifted, like a door opening. The human in him that had grown numb from loss began to stir. He thought of his sister lost in the blockade, and wondered if perhaps freeing someone else might fill that hollow inside. Ceres felt the pull of his thoughts through the faint link between them. She whispered, "You are strange, even your sadness burns like fire." He looked at her and said, "Maybe that is why we survive longer than we should." She tilted her head. "Maybe that is why you scare gods." Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, and somewhere deep in the void, the hunters turned their ships toward the human who wished for freedom, not power. Their engines woke like storms, and the chase for Ryan and Ceres had begun. Ryan woke to the sound of warning sirens echoing through the small ship. The lights flickered red, and Ceres was already standing by the viewport. Her glow dimmed her eyes sharp as she stared into the void outside. He followed her gaze and saw shapes moving in the darkness, long and thin ships that glided like sharks through water. The hunters had come. They looked nothing like any alien Ryan had seen before. Their hulls shimmered like oil. Their engines made no heat. They were machines built for pursuit. Cirrus, said in a quiet voice the bailiffs. They have come to erase your wish and reset me to the bottle. Ryan felt anger rise but kept his tone calm. What happens if they catch us? They will erase the memory of your choice and bind me again. She said softly, and your mind will break under the rewrite, he swore under his breath and ran to the controls. The ship was small, a salvager not built for battle, but he had learned tricks over the years. He pushed the engines to the edge of meltdown, and the ship lurched forward, scraping past debris fields of dead satellites. Cirrus clutched the chair, her light pulsing faster. She asked, "What are you doing?" And he answered, "Buying time." She could sense his determination and felt something in her chest stir. Something that felt like fear mixed with awe. She had seen countless masters beg for protection. None had ever tried to protect her. She stretched her hands and the air shimmered. She could still call fragments of her old power, though the wish had cut her. Chains, her strength was scattered. She formed a shield of pale light around the ship to bend sensors away. For a few moments it worked. The hunters swept past, searching blind. Ryan pulled into the shadow of a broken freighter and cut the engines. Both stood still, breathing in silence. The void pressed heavy between them. Ryan asked, "What are these hunters exactly, and why do they care so much about wishes?" Cirrus closed her eyes and said, "Long ago my kind were built by an empire that traded. Desire they made bottles so that mortals could shape reality, but power that answers to will alone is chaos. The hunters became the regulators. They enslaved my kind to keep order. They believed no wish should exist without their approval. Your wish broke that balance." Ryan leaned back in his chair thinking, "So I broke their law by freeing you and they want to fix it." "Yes," she said, "and you cannot reason with them. They do not see people, only systems." He grinned. "Sounds like most governments." She smiled faintly. For the first time she looked almost human. Ryan asked, "Can you fight them?" Her face darkened. "Not yet. I am incomplete. When you freed me, I lost access to the core source. My strength is scattered across the network of bottles they keep in their vault. Then we steal it back," he said, as if it were the simplest plan in the world. She looked at him stunned. "You would attack the court of want for me, for a stranger?" He shrugged. "You are not a stranger, not anymore. Besides, I do not like bullies." He started rerouting power into the hidden drone bay on his ship. Old mining drones armed with cutters and plasma torches came to life around them. Floating like a small swarm, he ordered them to scatter mines through the debris field. If the hunters came back, they would not find easy prey. Cirrus watched him with quiet wonder. His species had barely reached the outer systems, yet his courage burned brighter than the engines. She whispered to herself, "No wonder they fear humans." Ryan caught the words. "What did you say?" She shook her head. "Nothing, just thinking how strange your kind is. Most beings wish for more power. You use yours to give it away." He gave a small smile. "Maybe that is how we find meaning." She turned her gaze to the stars, feeling something break open inside her. A strange warmth that had nothing to do with magic. Minutes later the sensors pinged again. The hunters were returning, this time with reinforcements. Ryan cursed and started the engines. Cirrus raised, her hands light flaring brighter than before. She said, "Let me try something old and risky." She chanted words that felt like vibration in the bones. The space around them bent. The ship flickered, and for a heartbeat, they were somewhere else. It was not a jump, more like sliding through folds of space. When the blur cleared, they were above a green planet surrounded by shattered moons. Ryan gasped. "What did you do?" She smiled weakly and said, "I borrowed a trick from the bottle's memory. It will hide us, but not for long. I cannot hold it forever." He looked out at the horizon and said, "Then we make this place a trap. We will give them a welcome they will never forget." Cirrus collapsed into the chair, exhausted, her light dim. She whispered, "Why do you keep fighting, Ryan? Why not run forever?" He looked at her and said, "Running never saved anyone. Freedom means standing your ground." She felt his words echo inside her, deeper than magic. She realized humans had a kind of power no wish could mimic. They chose pain over surrender, and that made them dangerous. The hunters appeared again at the edge of the planet, their ships aligning for descent. Ryan armed his drones and grinned. "Let them come tonight. They learn what human stubbornness looks like. Outside, the stars flickered as the first shots burned through atmosphere, and the war for one man's wish truly began. The night sky above the green planet was filled with burning trails of fire as the hunter ships descended through the clouds. Their silver hulls cutting through the air like blades, Rian guided his small ship into the mountains where old mining tunnels provided cover. Sarah sat beside him, her glow faint, but steady, her power still rebuilding from the jump. She whispered, softly, "They will not stop, Rian. They never stop once a rule has been broken. They hunt until balance is restored." He stared at the radar that pulsed red with approaching enemies. "Then we make new balance," he said. She tilted her head, curious. "You speak as if defiance is a duty." He smiled, tired but fierce. "Maybe for humans it is. We do not like chains. Not even invisible ones." The tunnels were dark, filled with echoes of old machines. Rian landed and shut the engines off. The silence pressed. In heavy and thick, Sarah's touched the wall. Feeling the memory of the place, her voice low. This world was once rich with life until the hunters came. They used it as a proving ground for those who tried to break the pact. Ryan felt a chill crawl up his spine. "So we are not the first." "No," she said quietly. "But maybe you can be the last." Ryan unpacked his tools, spreading them across a metal table. His hands moved fast, building small devices from scraps, mining drones, old plasma cores, and broken scanners. Sarah watched, amazed by how quickly he adapted humans she thought were born engineers. They did not wait for miracles, they built them. He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I am building traps. Nothing fancy, but enough to buy time for your power to return." She hesitated before asking, "Why do you care so much about me?" Rian paused at her question, his face shadowed by the glow of the tools. "I lost someone, my sister, when the blockade fell. I could not save her, and I have hated the word helpless ever since. Maybe freeing you is the only thing that made sense." She reached out, touching his hand for a moment. The contact sent a pulse of warmth through them both. She said softly, "Then maybe I was meant to meet you." As hours passed, Sarah began to regain fragments of her strength. Her hands glowed brighter as she traced symbols in the air, runes that shimmered and hung like golden dust. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. She replied, "Weaving illusions to mask our heat and scent. It will make their sensors see ghosts in the wind." Rian nodded approvingly. "You really are something," she smiled, a rare, warm smile. "You are too reckless for a mortal," she teased, and for a moment, the fear faded, replaced by laughter. A sound neither of them had heard in too long. First attack came before dawn. Beams of blue energy lanced through the clouds, shaking the mountains. Rian triggered his traps. Mines exploded. Drones swarmed, and the air filled with smoke and fire. The hunters advanced in perfect formation, their voices, like metal scraping stone, demanding surrender. Cirrus rose, her eyes blazing brighter than any star. She raised her hands, and the ground trembled. Shards of light shot upward, striking the hunter ships. They faltered, their systems confused by her illusions. Ryan jumped into his cockpit and shouted into the comm, "If you want her, come through me." His ship roared to life, weaving through debris, firing makeshift cannons built from mining gear. He fought with desperation, not skill, turning every broken rock and machine into a weapon. Sarah felt his resolve like a current of raw energy feeding her fading power. She drew on it, shaping a storm of light that spread across the sky, blinding their enemies. One by one, the hunter ships began to fall. The ground shook with each crash, but Sarah knew it was not over. She sensed a greater presence approaching, the Alpha Bailiff, a commander born from the first bottle, the enforcer of the oldest laws. When his ship descended, the clouds burned black, and the air, screamed. Ryan turned to Sarah. "What is that?" she whispered. "The first enforcer, the one who wrote the rule that no genie can be free." Ryan gritted his teeth. "Then let us see if the old rule still holds." He launched forward, his ship diving straight toward the massive vessel. Sarah extended her light, weaving it around his ship like armor. Together, they cut through the sky like a comet. The enforcer's voice thundered across the air. "You dare defy the pact, mortal, your kind will be erased." Ryan shouted, "Back maybe, but not today." He released all power at once, drones, missiles, plasma. The sky became a storm of fire and light. When the smoke cleared, the Enforcer ship burned in the distance, crippled but alive. Ryan's ship was damaged, smoke filling the cabin. Saris reached him, placing her hand on his chest, her magic flowing into his broken ribs, healing what she could. He coughed weakly and whispered, "Did we win?" She shook her head. "Not yet. The Enforcer will heal, but he will remember you, and that is worse." She looked up at the dawn breaking through the smoke. "Your wish has spread. The hunters know humans will not kneel, and that has already changed everything." They hid again, deeper in the mountain caves where ancient carvings glowed faintly, telling stories of other species that once fought the same fight. Saris read the runes aloud. They all tried to escape their bottles, but none succeeded. Until now, Ryan asked. Why now? She looked at him with something like wonder. "Because you are different. You do not ask for power or immortality. You ask for freedom. Even for others who are not your kind, that is something new in this galaxy." She paused and smiled faintly. Maybe humanity was born for this moment. Ryan looked out at the dawn and said, "Maybe we were meant to show them that choice is stronger than law." For the first time, Saris felt something like hope, the kind that warmed her from within. She sat beside Ryan, watching the sunlight crawl across the valley below, and whispered, "They will come again." He nodded. "I know then," she said quietly. "Then let us be ready." And for the first time since her creation, Saris did not feel like a weapon. She felt alive and free, standing beside a human who had made the stars themselves take notice. The mountain caves offered temporary safety, but Ryan knew it would not last. The hunters would not forget a human who defied their laws and freed a bound genie. He checked his scanners over and over, each beep and flicker warning him that the Enforcers were regrouping. Saris hovered beside him, her light dim but steady. Her eyes tracing the jagged walls as if reading the story of the rocks themselves. She whispered, "We can use this place to strike first?" He nodded, his mind racing for ideas. Every salvage drone, every piece of mining equipment became a weapon, a lure, a trap. He moved quickly, attaching sensors and charges, placing decoys that looked like escape pods, while Saris shaped illusions across the valleys to mislead any approaching scouts. The air shimmered as she bent light and shadow together to form ghostly duplicates of their ship. They glowed faintly like will-o'-the-wisps and flickered between rocks and sky. When the hunters came, they would see things that were not there. Ryan worked tirelessly, sweating and bleeding as he rigged the final charge near the cliffside, a plan forming in his mind that was reckless and brilliant at once. Saris touched his shoulder gently. "Do not push too far." He looked at her and smiled. "Faintly, I know the risk, but if we wait, they will corner us." She nodded, understanding. This human was not like the others. He fought not for greed, not for glory, but for the freedom of another, and that made him dangerous beyond measure. The first wave of hunters came at night, the sky glowing with their engines cutting through clouds of ash and dust. They descended carefully, expecting traps, but Ryan had prepared them for deception. Every mine, every drone, every illusion was placed with purpose. The hunters misread shadows and fired on ghosts while Ryan guided the drones to cut off their retreat. Saris expanded her power, weaving a barrier of light around the caves, confusing sensors and making the human ship appear to vanish. She whispered quietly to Ryan, "They will never anticipate what comes next." He nodded, releasing a series of plasma nets that snared smaller ships, sending them spinning out of control. A low hum of energy filled the caves and reverberated across the mountains. Ryan ducked as debris fell, the ground shaking with the force of explosions. Saris focused her energy, shaping waves of light that struck the hunters, disorienting them, while she whispered old spells that had not been spoken in centuries. The hunters faltered, their systems glitching and misfiring as if reality itself had grown uncertain around them. Hours passed in a blur of motion and chaos. Ryan moved like a phantom between machines, activating traps and rerouting power. Saris followed his movements, her own magic flowing to strengthen his maneuvers. Together, they formed a strange unity, neither fully human nor fully genie, but something greater, their combined will bending the battlefield around them. The hunters regrouped, sending a massive cruiser to strike the caves directly. Ryan cursed. The ship was massive, its hull shimmering like black ice. It bore the mark of the Alpha Bailiff, the enforcer who had first come for Saris. He looked at her grimly. This is it, the heart of their power. Saris nodded. I will be with you. The enforcer descended into the valley, their weapons flaring bright against the darkness. Ryan piloted his ship, weaving through the air, activating drones that flew like deadly insects. The ground below became a storm of traps, spikes, wires, and energy pulses. Saris reached out, extending her hands. A column of golden light erupted from the cave floor, striking the enforcer's ship. She chanted words that twisted sensors and scrambled targeting systems. The massive ship lurched, unable to predict the sudden distortion. Ryan fired the remaining plasma cannons directly into the hull, timing each shot to the pulse of her light. The enforcer roared in frustration. The humans were unpredictable and dangerous. He had not calculated for defiance and ingenuity together. Ryan maneuvered his ship to fly past the enforcer, drawing it toward the cliffside where the final charges had been placed. Saris whispered. Now he understood, and accelerated toward the cliff. The massive ship followed, unable to resist the human lure. The explosions detonated perfectly. The cliffside crumbled and the Alpha cruiser spun violently, sending energy and debris scattering across the valley. The hunters screamed across comms, but Ryan ignored it. He had to survive. He had to protect Saris. When the dust settled, the valley was littered with wreckage. The surviving hunter ships retreated into the shadows of space, broken and battered. The caves trembled from the force of the explosions. Ryan climbed out of his ship, covered in soot and blood. Saris hovered above him, her glow stronger now, her chains fully dissolved. She smiled softly. You did it? She said quietly. But he shook his head. The war is not over. The hunters will regroup and they will come with more, but now they know humans do not bend easily. He laughed softly, rubbing his shoulder. I guess we will teach them patience then. She floated closer, resting, her hand against his cheek, the warmth of her touch spreading like sunlight. He felt something stir inside him, a hope he had not known since losing his sister. We fight for those we care for, not for ourselves. She whispered. Yes, and that is what makes you terrifying to them. The night passed slowly, the stars above flickering as if acknowledging the battle that had just taken place. Ryan patched what he could, while Saris maintained a shield of light over the caves to hide their presence. The humans, who had once scavenged quietly in the outer rings of space, had now shown a spark of defiance that would echo far beyond their own system. Saris looked at him carefully and said, You have taught me something. Humans can choose to protect others, not because law demands it, not because magic compels it, but because they will. It is an unusual strength. Ryan smiled faintly. Maybe that is why we survive longer than anyone expects. She nodded, and for a moment the air was calm and still, as if the mountains themselves had paused to watch them breathe. Ryan knew this victory was only temporary. The hunters would not forgive the defiance, but the bond between them had grown stronger than any chains could hold. Saris felt the same, her magic now fully restored. Her light pulsing with vitality, she hovered beside him and whispered, We will face them together. He nodded. The human heart has a stubborn rhythm, he said, and that rhythm is louder than any law in the galaxy. Together, they stood among the wreckage, the sky above brightening with the first light of day, and both knew that the battles ahead would be harder. But with trust and courage, they would meet them head-on. And perhaps in the end, the galaxy would remember that humans did not kneel. They chose to rise and to protect, and in that choice there was power stronger than any hunter or enforcer could ever command. Ryan and Saris moved cautiously through the ruins of the valley, their ship barely functional, and their supplies stretched thin, but they had survived what no one expected humans to survive. The hunter forces had been forced to retreat, but their vengeance would come the moment they repaired and regrouped. Saris hovered beside Ryan, her glow soft but steady. She traced patterns in the air, whispering old words that helped conceal their movements and mask their trail. They traveled across shattered moons and forgotten debris fields. Ryan piloted their small craft, using ancient mining routes and forgotten jump points, each moment a risk, each system potentially crawling with enemy scouts. Yet he did not falter, because he had learned what humans always learned. Even when they were alone in the cold void, Hope was a choice, and courage was the only path to make it realize. They moved. Saris taught Rian more about the nature of wishes, how words and intention could twist reality, and how most mortals failed because they sought only for themselves. He listened carefully, taking notes in his mind and in the ship's log, making mental diagrams for traps and protections. He knew that every scrap of knowledge could save their lives in the coming weeks. The humans they had once avoided would now be allies or enemies, depending on how well they understood the new order. Ryan thought about the settlements he had scavenged from long ago. Miners, traders, and stray pilots, all of them small lives overlooked by the Empire but valuable because they had grit. He spoke to Saris quietly. We can find them, teach them, protect them. She looked at him, her eyes glowing brighter. Do you really think your species can rally scattered survivors? He smiled faintly. Yes, because humans are not machines. They care for each other even when it costs them everything. The next few days were a blur of skirmishes and narrow escapes. They found a small colony of miners trapped in an abandoned station. The hunters had taken it over, turning it into a temporary base. Ryan and Saris moved silently using drones and illusions to mask their approach. When the alarm sounded, Rian triggered a sequence of explosives he had set. The miners panicked at first, but Saris cast a shield over them, holding back debris and fires until they could escape. Rian led the way, their small team weaving through narrow corridors, blasting away patrol drones and freeing captives one by one. Saris whispered to him, "Humans fight for each other before they fight for glory." He nodded. Yes, and that is why we survive longer than anyone expects the rescued. Miners joined them immediately, offering food, fuel, and makeshift weapons. Ryan distributed what little they had, training the strongest and cleverest in tactics. Saris reinforced their minds and bodies with minor spells, helping them avoid the worst fatigue and injuries. Each night they gathered around fires or glow lamps, sharing stories of home and of losses. Rian listened to each tale, learning names, faces, and histories that might otherwise be forgotten, teaching the humans not only to fight, but to care for one another. As the small fleet of survivors grew, Rian devised a campaign of small victories, scouting enemy supply lines and ambushing patrols. They moved from moon to debris field, each success bolstering morale. Saris watched quietly, amazed at how humans could unite quickly, yet retain individuality. Each action was unpredictable and flexible. Unlike any other species she had known, she whispered to Ryan, "They learn fast and fight harder together." He nodded. Yes, they do, and we must use that to our advantage. The human team spread across debris belts, learning to read sensors, signals, and enemy patterns. They built hidden caches and false depots, setting traps that wasted enemy resources without ever revealing the full strength of their force. Rian smiled grimly. This is how we prepare for the hunters. They will come, but they will never find a soft target again. Night after night, they read the names of the fallen aloud, teaching the survivors that every life mattered, and that courage was remembered. Saris felt something stir in her as well. The humans honored the weak and the lost while preparing to face the powerful and cruel. She whispered quietly, "You show them how to rise without losing themselves," Ryan replied, softly, "and they will remember us for it." One of the miners asked him why they kept saving the weakest when they could flee with only the strong. He looked at the child and said, "Because the measure of a species is not what it takes for itself, but what it is willing to give to others." The miners nodded, understanding, and for the first time many of them felt a purpose beyond mere survival. The Alpha Enforcer would come. Eventually Saris sensed it. She warned Rian, and the human leader nodded. They could not face him directly yet, not without preparation, so they kept moving, each skirmish designed to weaken the enemy, while teaching their people to read signals and anticipate traps. The team built bonds stronger than any chain the outcast teaching. The humans how to fight as a unit and how to value every life they saved. The prisoners they freed joined in willingly, some learning quickly, some slowly, but all united by the sense that they were no longer prey. The small victories accumulated, like sparks in the dark. Rian looked out at the void and whispered to Saris, "We are creating something new." She nodded. "Yes, you are building not just resistance but a family, and families survive wars that armies cannot." One day while scouting a destroyed station, they found a hidden library full of records and old communications detailing the hierarchy of the hunters, the alpha bailiffs, the enforcers, and the subtle signs of fear and obedience in their ranks. Saris traced the symbols, her fingers, glowing softly. This knowledge is dangerous but powerful. Ryan said, then we will use it carefully. He spent hours cross-referencing patrol routes and signals, teaching the humans how to interpret even small details of the enemy. They practiced tirelessly, setting traps that mimicked the hunter's own strategies yet tailored to human ingenuity and resourcefulness. The survivors learned not only to fight, but to anticipate the thoughts of an opponent, their minds working in unison, while Saris marveled at the ingenuity and resilience of their species. By the end of the week, Rian's small human force had transformed from scattered miners into a disciplined and loyal unit, capable of surviving far beyond what the hunters expected. The outcast whispered, quietly, they will never see you as prey again. He nodded. Yes, and soon they will understand that humans are predators, not for teeth or claws, but for courage and choice. The stars themselves seemed to recognize the change. Saris felt it as a resonance. Through her own being, the galaxy had begun to notice that one human and one freed genie could challenge centuries of law and tyranny, and that their bond could ignite the spark that made humanity rise higher than anyone thought possible. The humans, prepared for the battles to come, knowing the Alpha Enforcer would return stronger, but also knowing they had built something worth fighting for each night. Ryan and Saris shared quiet moments of reflection, the rescued miners around them sleeping, or repairing ships. They looked at each other silently, acknowledging the truth of what they had done together. They were no longer alone. And when the hunters came again, they would find humans who did not bow, who did not flee, and who would fight, not for survival alone, but for the freedom of every being who could not fight for themselves. And in that they found a strength far greater than any weapon the galaxy had yet seen. The void ahead was silent except for the hum of Ryan's ship and the faint pulse of Saris' light as they approached the shattered worlds that marked the arena, known as the Great Cull. It was a place of judgment and terror, where rising species were tested to their breaking points. Rian felt the weight of what lay ahead. He glanced at Saris and whispered, "This is it, the final test." She looked back, her eyes, molten silver, steady and bright. They had survived hunts and traps they had freed. The weak, but the cull was different here. There were no rules but survival, and the hunters would expect them to bend or break. She nodded quietly. Humans are not meant to bend, they choose to rise. Ryan smiled faintly. Yes, and that choice will be our weapon. The shattered world spun around them, debris of ancient civilizations and fallen conquerors casting long shadows across the void. The arena glowed faintly from the beacons placed by the hunters, signaling the boundaries and the rules to all who entered. The air was thick with tension. The Alpha Enforcers had sent vessels that pulsed with deadly energy and the scent of power. Ryan guided their ship, carefully weaving between fragments of worlds, each move calculated to avoid detection, while Saris whispered protective charms over the hull that shimmered in patterns invisible to the human eye, but deadly to sensors. The first packs of hunters appeared like wolves in the dark, their ships moving in perfect formation, calculating, and cold, their engines silent until unleashed. Then they struck like a storm. Ryan released the drones prepared for such encounters. They moved like shadows, weaving through debris, attacking weak points and drawing enemy fire, while Saris manipulated, the light and gravity around them bending perception. The hunters faltered, expecting humans to flee or beg for mercy. But Ryan did neither. He piloted with precision, striking where their numbers were weakest and retreating when overwhelming power approached. He shouted over the comm, "Stay with me." She replied calmly, "I am always with you." They had become more than allies. They were a single force acting on instinct and trust, their bond unspoken but unbreakable. The arena beacons pulsed as if, mocking them, the hunters had expected the usual dance of fear, the broadcast signals used to break minds and spirits. But Ryan had learned too much to be baited. He disabled the beacons using a combination of Saris energy and improvised hacks. From the drones, the hunter packs were thrown into confusion, their coordination failing as the false signals multiplied. The humans moved like shadows, striking in silence. The light of the shattered worlds reflected off the debris, casting illusions that even the hunters could not distinguish real from false. Ceres whispered, "This is the power of choice. Your species does not fight because it must, but because it chooses to, and that unpredictability terrifies them." Rian grinned. "It is why we survive ours," passed like a storm, their small force weaving through the arena, cutting down the hunters while rescuing captives from other species caught in the cull. Ceres guided them using signals only she could manipulate. Rian learned to read the alien movements, predicting their strikes and setting traps that used their own instincts against them. They became a wave of chaos that flowed through the shattered worlds, striking fear into the hearts of the enforcers. The Alpha Bailiff realized that the humans did not play by the old rules. He tried to bargain, offering Rian a throne, a place of power for Earth if he would rebind. Ceres Rian looked at him coldly and said, "We do not trade freedom for power." The enforcer growled and unleashed the full might of his fleet. But the humans were no longer prey. They were predators with a mission. At the center of the arena, a cluster of young captives trapped behind energy walls drew Rian's attention. He refused to leave them behind, even if it meant confronting the Alpha directly. Ceres warned that the delay could cost them everything, but Rian's mind was clear, his choice unwavering. He piloted into the danger zones with precision, freeing the captives using a combination of drones and Ceres's energy. To bypass the wards, each life he saved became another ally. The young ones learned quickly under his guidance, understanding the patterns and signals of the hunters. Within moments they were moving as a unit, a miniature fleet of humans and freed beings working together. Ceres watched in awe. The human mind was capable of improvisation, the human heart of courage unmatched in the galaxy. The final confrontation came as the Alpha engaged directly his massive vessel, unleashing storms of energy. Rian's team dodged and weaved, using every scrap of skill and every fragment of knowledge they had gathered. The freed captives joined in, using captured drones to harry the enforcer, his systems faltering as he underestimated the coordination of beings who chose to protect rather than dominate. Ceres whispered, "Now make your choice carefully." Rian did not hesitate. He used the third wish, not for power, not for revenge, but for law. He wished that every wish made or to be made must honor the free consent and dignity of all involved. Any attempt to break this would fail harmlessly. The energy of the wish rippled across the arena. The Alpha staggered. The beacons flickered, and bonds that had held genies and mortals alike shattered. Across the galaxy, the old order quaked. The hunters faltered, unable to comprehend the human defiance. The arena itself seemed to pulse with the acknowledgement of a new rule. Rian guided his ship through the chaos, gathering the freed captives and retreating from the immediate battlefield. Ceres beside him was radiant. Her chains fully dissolved, the energy of the third wish echoing in her being. She whispered, "You have done what no one else could." Rian said quietly, "It was not me. It was all of us, those who chose to protect and to rise together outside the shattered worlds." The hunters began to withdraw, some confused, some broken, others fleeing to the dark regions to lick wounds and rethink the meaning of law and power. The humans had proven that choice and courage could rewrite the galaxy. When they returned to the temporary safe zones, the freed beings celebrated Rian and Ceres, quietly prepared for what would come next. The lessons learned and the bonds formed would carry them. Through every challenge ahead, the arena had been a crucible that tested species and law, and humans had emerged, not only alive, but reshaping the understanding of what it meant to be predators. The survivors gathered around the small fleet, listening to Rian speak of freedom, courage, and choice. Ceres watched silently, knowing that the galaxy had changed forever because one human and one freed genie had dared to act not for self, but for the dignity of all, and that choice echoed louder than any weapon, than any enforcer, than any law written in the stars. Dawn broke over the shattered worlds, and for the first time in centuries the light fell across the arena without the shadow of control the hunters had expected, groveling in fear, but instead they found humans standing tall, bloodied but unbroken. Rian guided the small fleet of freed captives and survivors toward a high plateau, where the view stretched across the fractured moons and planets. The Alpha enforcers hovered at a distance, calculating their next strike. Saris hovered beside Ryan, her glow warm and steady. She said quietly, "The judgment has come. The hunters expected submission. Yet humans do not bow for fear, they act for choice." He nodded. "Yes. And that is why we rise." The survivors gathered around them, the miners and young captives who had learned quickly, their faces marked with soot and determination. They had seen death and horror, and yet here they stood alive because one human had chosen to fight not for glory or safety, but for freedom. The Alpha appeared, finally descending slowly, massive engines flaring. He spoke with a voice that shook the void. "You have defied centuries of law. Mortal, you have freed what was never meant to be free, and yet here you stand." Expecting to be acknowledged, Ryan stepped forward. He did not raise weapons. Instead, he spoke calmly and clearly. "We ask nothing for ourselves. We ask that freedom be honored, that captives and the weak be protected, that no wish ever again may force submission or harm without consent." The enforcer's eyes flared disbelief. "Your audacity is unmatched. You risk all and demand a new law." Ryan replied, "Yes, because choice is stronger than chains and courage is louder than fear." Saris felt the ripple of the wish they had made extend even here, binding itself into the minds and hearts of those who still clung to old orders. Some of the hunter pack shifted uneasily. Others whispered among themselves, confusion spreading. The galaxy had begun to take notice that humans did not bend, they did not beg. They did not bargain with chains, they acted with intent and morality. A few of the older enforcers stepped forward, pledging loyalty to the new rule. Some abandoned their posts and retreated. To distant regions, the Alpha faltered, calculating how to respond. His fleet was powerful but fractured by disbelief. He said, "You have no throne, no empire to claim, no law to enforce. Yet you demand obedience from those who built the universe of wishes." Ryan looked at him and said, "No throne, no law, only choice and courage. The galaxy will remember those who protect others, not those who bind them." The captives who had grown under his guidance stepped forward, their faces resolute, carrying the spark of what humans could teach other species. The Alpha realized that the test was lost, not because the humans were stronger in numbers or weapons, but because their will could not be broken, their intent pure, their courage unmatched. Saris extended her hands, a soft glow surrounding Ryan as he looked at the fleet, and the Alpha, one by one, ships began to lower weapons, retreating. The power of the wish was not a strike. It was a law of consequence. Those who attempted to harm without consent found their systems failing harmlessly, each effort to coerce or enslave falling apart harmlessly across the arena. The old beacons shattered, and the void hummed with acknowledgement. The Alpha sank to his knees, not in defeat, but in comprehension. He had underestimated a species that chose to rise for others and protect the weak. The survivors cheered quietly, knowing their lives and the lives of countless others had been preserved by courage, choice, and unity. Ryan and Saris stood side by side, their bond stronger than any law or chain, and it was not a bond of master and servant, but one of equals, of trust, of survival and respect. The freed beings began to scatter across the shattered worlds, teaching others what had been learned. Humans became teachers not only of fighting, but of choice, of morality, and of the power to protect the weak as the fleet returned to the edge of known space. Ryan and Saris guided the survivors toward a safe station, a place to rebuild and recover. The freed genies and captives worked alongside humans, learning to value the lessons of courage and protection. Saris whispered quietly, "This is more than survival. It is a legacy." Ryan nodded. "Yes, a legacy of choice. Not fear of bondage, of rising for others, not ruling over them." The galaxy watched as this small human force became something greater, a symbol that even the smallest and least powerful could change the order of things, not by domination, but by protecting the innocent. On the ring station, they restored what could be repaired. Ships and equipment were refitted. Miners taught new recruits scavenging and survival, while Ryan trained them in tactics and coordination. Saris spent her time teaching control of energy, an understanding of wishes, how intent shaped outcomes, and how compassion could guide power. The station became a refuge, a beacon across the stars for those who sought freedom and protection from tyranny. Rian looked out at the horizon at the void and said quietly, "To Ceres, the galaxy is changing." She nodded. "Yes, and humans have shown it is not teeth or claws that make a predator, but the courage to stand for others." The young captives who had once cowered now looked up to him with respect, not fear. Rian smiled, faintly, and whispered to them, "Remember that choice is a weapon stronger than any cannon and compassion a shield no force can break." As the stars glimmered in the distance, news spread across systems of the human who freed a genie and challenged the laws of the hunters. The tale grew in every corner where beings feared the hunters and enforcers. They spoke of the courage and choice that had overturned centuries of oppression. Ryan and Ceres watched silently, knowing the galaxy was taking. Note, humans were no longer prey, and they were not only predators but guardians who rose by protecting others. A new law had been written not by decree but by action and intent, and in that law the galaxy saw that sometimes the smallest sparks could ignite revolutions that even the greatest empires could not extinguish. The human team gathered one final time under the soft glow of the ring station lights. The survivors stood tall, their faces marked with scars and determination. Rian looked at Ceres and said, "We have done what we came to do." She smiled, her light pulsing warmly. "Yes, you have taught the galaxy a new kind of strength." And he whispered quietly, "Perhaps one day they will understand that the strongest species is not the one that conquers but the one that protects."